person who's watching the change and how their piece in the relationship also changes. And then we talked about the skills. I think Mags made a really good point. Like it's not, Mags joked and she said, of course we're friggin' skilled to do it. Oh, why are we here otherwise? Which I thought was really nice, good confident answer. But it was actually, she made the point, it's all about them. So it's not any different than what we've kind of been doing with the individuals. And we talked about, the previous session with coaching, our career coaching, it was good to see that kind of like there might be a suite of tools that would help us to kind of, work through some of those pieces. It really depends on the couple. And then it was also like when my thought was, I suppose what kind of holds me back is, it's when you're in a one-on-one coaching, you're so focused on managing the dynamic with just one person. The thoughts of doing it with two and then having like a middle agenda, trying to bring them together, it just feels a little bit overwhelming, and there's a lot to kind of watch and take in. But I suppose that will come with practice. And then my other part was, if we were to think about relationship coaching, is it that you coach them always together, or do you coach one at a time and how do you start that? And if the couple decides is it that the couple decides themselves, or you help them, or you tell them? They were the kind of questions and points that came up.
Very good, Dee. That's brilliant. Yeah, and we will be covering we'll be covering all of that stuff. And in fact, I suppose one of the main things that I want to focus on today is that difference between coaching an individual or coaching a couple or business partners, because as you pointed out, it is different. There are different dynamics going on in front of you. So it is slightly different than what you would have been taught in the course so far. So thanks for that, T. Okay, anybody else?
Okay, I'll go for I was with Kelly and Sarah.
Great, Helen, go for it.
We looked more at kind of the issues that people coming with relationship coaching might have. We talked about domestic violence, people that are in serial bad relationships that always seem to pick people that are not good to them or unsuitable in some way. People that are staying in a marriage for the sake of their kids. Where there's affairs or betrayal, or where there's a threat of one partner going to leave, or where there's somebody having a midlife crisis, or one person in the relationship has got a serious health problem that's impacting on their relationship, or whether one of them was sent by their partner because there's something wrong with them or something that needs fixed. Like the other groups, we said we thought we have the coaching skills, but we don't feel experienced, and we thought it would be a very scary prospect managing the coaching of the two people. And do you talk to them individually and then together, and how do you make sure you don't accidentally disclose something that one of them said individually without being brought into the group? And we also talked about having your own triggers. I mean, I personally wouldn't be happy with relationship coaching. I would feel uncomfortable because, well, I think you all probably know through all the coaching, one of my sisters is in a very bad relationship, and it would bring out all the wrong things in me. So I would steer clear of relationship coaching, and I think I would just say to them, it's not my area of expertise, and I can refer you on to somebody who would be better qualified to deal with it, and who mightn't kill you. So.
All right. So Helen, what I'm to take from that is that you prefer the career coaching because it's safer.
Yes, absolutely.
Only messing. Okay, yeah. So, but you did mention a few interesting things there, and yeah, it can get very sticky, and you have to be very careful. And I will definitely cover the issue of coaching them individually or together. So I'll definitely come back to that. Thanks for that, Helen. And anybody else?
I'll swing in for our group. So I was with Porrick, Amy, and Beck.
Okay.
So very similar to what's been put out there already. Communication was kind of like the epicenter of everything, and there was all these little bits coming out from it. But I suppose coaching people around the blockages that might be presenting for them in their relationship. So like how did the blockage develop? What's going on? We put down like there might be trust issues, there might be a dominance issue. Trying to see the other person's point of view is a huge barrier, I think. Once again, going back to communication, but like being so caught up in your own experience, not being able to actually get an insight into what the other person's thinking. Expectations is a huge thing, and beliefs and values, really important. I think, but values, particularly if you have a very, very different set of values, that might be a massive challenge, in friendships as well, business partners, all of that. Different personality traits. I actually wrote down codependency as well, which seems to be quite common sometimes. But Beck had suggested once again that for question 2, the answer, like, we're coaching the person, so we are qualified to deal with the issues, but we did say that potentially if you had, much as to what was just said there by Helen, that your view of, like, you know, your own experiences, how might that impact? But to back that up, what would we need to overcome that, or what might be missing would be like supervision. So continuously kind of developing yourself. If it did bring something up in you, potentially you could link in with your supervisor or get a debrief to support you around that. So to kind of have the resources and supports in place as a coach to deal with these types of issues. And yeah, I guess the domestic violence one as well would be an issue. But I suppose that's just a case of, as well, potentially researching and being well versed on the resources. I personally would probably be fairly okay with that, just because I've worked in domestic violence situations before, but definitely I can see why many people wouldn't. So I think it's just being educated on what's available out there, so you can offer resources if they're comfortable.
Very good. Thanks, Marie. That's brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Teresa?
Oh yeah, I was with Elias and Jane and Evelyn, and we were talking really, first of all, again, it was communication issues, trust, issues that have come up maybe in pro bonos that presented as one thing, like, for example, one person, like a perspective of a relationship a person has with something else. Mind reading, I know they're thinking this. You know, so dealing with these things are quite common, and I think we all said that in those situations we probably would be able to deal with those kind of things. Jane has experience in conflict resolution in her job and mediation, so she said it might be an issue of confidence for her if it came to something more personal, like a marriage or something like that. And Elias said he would be afraid that there might be a trigger in it, that he would maybe side with one person for the other and go, oh, for God's sake. But he probably wouldn't, but that's his feeling. So again, for myself, I think I'd be able to do, like, I've been the peacemaker in the family, so I suppose there'd be an element, yes, I could deal with it to a certain point, but if it got too serious like that, I think I would probably refer to that. But I loved Anita's point about the relationship with yourself, because I think that's a really important one, and because your own relationship with yourself does reflect on how you react in every situation, not just in coaching and in your relationships, your friendships, the people you have in our course. It's how your own emotional intelligence really dictates so much. And when Anita said that, it really resonated with me.
Very good.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's it.
And absolutely 100% agree with that. It is easily the most important relationship that exists. Every other relationship is filtered through that relationship. So if you think about a filter mechanism, if there's stuff within the filter, it's going to obviously seep out into whatever you're filtering out into. So that's the piece that's core to everything, for sure. Thanks. Is there anyone else then that do we get around all the rooms? Yeah, we got around all the rooms. Have we? Okay. So, all right. So basically, and the reason I did that really was just to get your thoughts on it, rather than simply going through it step by step. So guys, I suppose the first thing I will say is that you absolutely do have the skills to deal with relationship coaching, in terms of one-to-one, for sure. And then depending on you guys' background, it may be that some of you have already worked in facilitation or worked with one-to-ones in other areas, or worked with groups, in which case it makes it a little bit easier for you to manage the two scenario, working with two. And we will come to that in a short while. But before we come to working with two, just to just to deal with some of the things that you mentioned, because there's obviously so many different possible scenarios that you could be faced with in terms of relationships. And you guys have covered quite a lot of them. And there's even more. One of the things that comes up quite a bit, guys, is loneliness, and people's desire to be in a relationship, in an intimate relationship, I should say, and their perceived inability to be in one, or people wanting to have a partner and not having a partner and struggling with that, and the loneliness and isolation that comes from that. And that can be very difficult for people to have to deal with. So clearly, when you're dealing with relationship issues, the one thing that stands out, I guess, is the pace of the sessions. So the pace of relationship coaching sessions is generally quite slow. So in other words, it would be very different to the kind of pace you would expect working with in business coaching, which tends to be quite fast. So they're two quite extremes. And the reason why relationship coaching tends to be very slow is I suppose obvious, in that it tends to be very delicate, and people struggle to talk about themselves. Like, people are great at talking about other things, but when it comes to talking about themselves, and I mean issues within themselves, they struggle. So you really do have to be totally at their pace, in their space, and making sure that none of your own stuff is leaking in or getting in the way at all. So taking it real slowly with them. So obviously, if a person is very lonely, then it's going to be slow-paced stuff. Okay, so for any of you guys who have tendency to like to move quickly, obviously you need to switch that piece off, and be in their world. So, and the way I would look at this, guys, and this would be true of all coaching anyway, is you need to see yourself as an alien on another planet. That's the way to see yourself. You're an alien on another planet, and because you are an alien on another planet, everything on that planet is alien to you. So therefore, you need to ask all the questions you need to ask. Nothing should be familiar to you on that planet. Does that make sense? Because your client's world will not be anywhere near the same as your world, ever. So there will be similarities, but that's because your own mind is at play relative to your own stuff. So always, never make assumptions, always ask the questions. And when it comes to relationship stuff, guys, we've all had relationship issues. There isn't any of us that can put our hands up confidently and say, no, not me, 100% perfect in relationships. It doesn't happen like that. We learn through relationships. We grow through relationships, good and bad stuff. And we learn about ourselves. So we've all experienced lots of different pain and suffering over the years, I guess. And we need to be watchful that none of that is triggered and is spilling out. Okay, so which is true of all kind of coaching, but it gets very kind of delicate when we start talking about relationships. All right. So one of the things that I want to say now, so that we don't have, it doesn't keep coming up, is the piece on the abuse piece. Okay. Because we could do a weekend workshop on that alone, and we wouldn't have to cover that here. I will say this, however, like Marie said, if you happen to be working in the relationship coaching area, it is a good idea to resource yourself and educate yourself about the different kind of interventions that may be out there for people, if they are in relationships that perhaps they need to get out of, I guess, or deal with things very quickly. So it would be important also to note that anything that you hear coming at you from a client that sounds criminal, you need to be able to alert your client about that because you do have an obligation to report something that is criminal, if you like. But you have to be very careful how you do that, because the last thing you want to do is to shut your client down. And you're not going to know, you're only going to hear a small little piece of what's really going on in the background. So you can't jump in there straight away. You've got to be very, very watchful. The most important thing for you, if your client is in an abusive relationship, is to make sure that they're able to talk about it, express themselves, because it is likely that they feel very unsafe doing that anywhere else. So you need to create that safety net for them to do that. So before anything else comes into play, that needs to be your priority. Make sure they're able to talk about it. And then, as Marie said, resource yourself around the different, I suppose, places within the general community that you could maybe mention to your clients, or give them phone numbers or whatever. So be watchful of that piece. Again, depending on if you're working with an organization that is dealing with abuse, then they will obviously have all the information and resources available to you anyway. And they will have all the protocols that's required working with that organization in relation to this kind of stuff. Okay, does that make sense to you guys? So if you actually work as a coach, as a relationship coach, it's still possible that kind of stuff could be brought up naturally, and because that's life, and it happens a lot, unfortunately. So again, be watchful, that you don't shut your client down, but also be aware that you do have an obligation as well. So what I would suggest you do, if you find yourself in that scenario and you're unsure what to do around that piece, make sure you coach your client well around the struggle that they're having. And then afterwards, make sure you start or a mentor coach, or seek out resources that would help you to be able to deal with help your client, basically. Does that make sense?
So Adrian, when would you said like you have an obligation to report it, so
yeah.
When would you do that? Yeah,
okay, so again, nothing is straightforward, I guess. Nothing is black and white. And like I said, you have a huge obligation to your clients to make sure that you're helping them to express themselves and to be able to free themselves from whatever situation they happen to be in. And the first thing that usually is required is to be able to get them to talk about their situation. So in other words, that safety net needs to be there first. You still need to make a reference, and this should be a part of the contract anyway, that they would sign. You still need to make a reference to the fact that that there is an obligation to report anything that's criminal or illegal or whatever. But at the same time, you are there for that person. So that's why I would suggest, if you find yourself in that boat, that you need to talk to someone afterwards, so a supervisor, or contact ICF Ireland, or contact Women's Aid if that's what you need to contact. But resource yourself. Don't try and deal with it yourself on your own. Okay, so the reason why I want to do this with you guys is we could spend the whole hour and a half just talking about that alone, and that doesn't make sense. Just be watchful of that piece. Okay, so The other scenario then, in terms of what kind of skills will you be using? You're using all the coaching skills. The obvious ones that are so important in relationship coaching is that connection piece, being able to connect with your client, making them feel as safe as possible, as early as possible, creating a really good rapport with them initially, okay? And making sure that you're listening with your heart rather than your ears, okay? So real empathic listening. They'll cop that very quickly, that's what's happening. And also, and clearly, being non-judgmental all the time. Okay, and I'm specifically talking about working with individuals for the moment. Stay in the client's agenda, you know that. Always stay in the client's agenda. So there's a couple of things that I want you guys to watch out for as well. Okay, I've already mentioned a couple of them. Be careful about similarities coming up. In other words, identifying with your client's situation. There is a fairly high chance that at some point with some of your clients, you would have been there yourself. Be watchful of that. Just note that has come into your mind, and then switch back to your client's world. Okay, switch back to your client's world. Watch making assumptions. That's what I said this already. You're an alien on another planet. Ask every question. Don't. Not everyone does this, guys, but the danger is that as you're hearing the story unfolding from your client, that you're beginning to analyze the story in your head. Yeah, you know the way you can do that. Watch that. If you find yourself doing that, just switch away from it. I mean, look, you are who you are, you know, so don't worry about it. But your awareness of you doing it is what's important. And then switch away straight away, because your analysis of the story is completely irrelevant and a huge distraction. Also, and I know you know this, but again, because we all love relationships, we all need relationships, we've all been in relationships, we're all in relationships. There is a danger that as we hear our clients talking about their situation, that we may think we have the answers for them. We never have their answers, never. Okay, so just because your mind is thinking that, let it think away, just switch away again back into your client's world. You never have their answers. Also watch the emotional side of things. Don't get caught up in your client's emotional turmoil. Okay, now that's easy to say. And I've got to be honest with you, myself, there have been times when I've been sitting, listening to my client's story, I've had to fight back the tears. It's been difficult at times. We're all human, we're all emotional beings, and it's going to get to us, but we have to be watchful. We can't. The last thing our client needs is for us to start crying during the session. That is not going to make them feel good, seriously. If a friend does, that's fine. A coach, no, it's not fine. So, but we're still emotional beings, we're still human beings, so we do have to be watchful. And that's why, going back to, I think when Anita said it and Teresa highlighted about your relationship with yourself, that is why it's such a key issue, not just for our clients, but obviously for ourselves as coaches. It's easy for stuff to get triggered. We need to manage our emotions. We need to manage our emotions. All right. So watch that as well. And the other thing to watch for, guys, is falling for your client. So again, we're emotional beings, and if you find that you're, despite yourself, you're being attracted to your client, you need to be watchful of it. At the end of the day, guys, we're human beings, so that could happen. This is possible. You definitely need to talk to someone, to one of your peers, one of your friends, a mentor, coach, or a supervisor, if you notice that that's happening. Does that make sense? Has anyone got any questions about what? Any?
What if it was your last session?
What if it was your last session with the clients?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
They're not your clients anymore, right?
Well, they may not be. That is possible. Look, if a situation like that happened, the obvious thing that needs to happen is you need to end the coach-client relationship. In other words, you're not going to be able to serve them well as a coach if that is happening. Obviously, if how would I put it? If it's reciprocated, well then, guys, no, it's all good. It's all good.
Never seen Elias take so many notes before.
What's that? What's that?
I'd be like, you should leave him. You know, what are you doing with him?
So, well, actually, guys, now, since you mentioned that, I actually remember a situation when I was, it was the early days of me as a coach. And I was working from the house. So I had a room in the house that I was working from. And was coaching a client about her trying to leave a relationship. And anyway, I was going to say she successfully left it, but I leave out the word successfully for the moment. She left the relationship anyway, and she was back for another session. And during the session, I could hear my wife answering the door, the hall door. So, you know, obviously I have to have full attention on my client, but at the same time, you know, these things happen, and I heard this happening, and I then heard my wife's voice raising, and I knew straight away there's some problem. So next thing, there was a knock on the door, and my wife opened the door, and she says, there's a problem. There's a man outside who's saying that his girlfriend is in here, and that she is being forced into leaving him by the coach.
Oh my God, Adrian.
It's like a soap opera.
Jeremy Kyle style, you know?
Yeah, so
Oh my God.
naturally I did a runner for the hills and left
Left your better half to manage it.
Absolutely, I had full confidence in her. So obviously my client heard that straight away, and she kind of said, "Oh my God!" So she went out, and your man was standing right at the front door step. So I had to go out, and I told him to move out of the garden. I said, "If you don't move out of the garden, I'm going to call the police straight away. You've no business being here." And he started to shout, and I said, "You need to calm down, because I'm simply going to be calling the police here." The girlfriend or ex-girlfriend intervened and tried to settle your man. So anyway, she did settle him down. He did go away, and we resumed the session. So I'm not saying that to scare you guys, all right? But it's just what Elias said. It just reminded me of that particular scenario, which I thought I had buried deep in my psyche. But anyway, clearly not. But no, so was I scared? Not really, to be honest with you. I just kind of worried that he'd come to our house and he knew our house. That was the kind of thing that concerned me a little bit. But these things can happen. So in other words, when we're helping a person to leave a relationship, obviously there's another person being left, and they may not be too pleased about it. Okay, so we have to be watchful at all times. But anyway, anybody else want to ask anything about anything I just said?
Just wondering, Adrian, in relation to that,
Yeah.
Is it ever the case where, like, obviously people give a lot of online reviews now?
Yeah.
Is there, I suppose, a risk that someone that's been affected by it can put something up like that damages your reputation as a coach?
Well, okay, so we know that we can't control these things, and we know that people can put stuff out there that are either extremely biased and nothing to do with the truth, or just pure lies. and there's nothing we can do about it. So what I would say about that, Kelly, is if that were to happen, the likelihood is there's 100 other messages up there talking about you as a brilliant coach. So damaging you, no, I don't think so. I really, unless you're doing it a lot. If there happens to be a lot of stuff online, similar stuff, then maybe you definitely need to have a chat with a supervisor.
Thank you.
But okay, guys. So I suppose what I want to say to you about working with an individual on relationship coaching stuff. Yes, you are absolutely trained to do that. The only real question is, do you want to do that? That's the only real question. I heard what Helen said earlier, and really that's all we have to look at. Do we want to be working with these kind of issues? And of course, they can come up anyway. So if we call ourselves a life coach, for example, then obviously people with relationship stuff could come to us. If we call ourselves a career coach, there's less chance of that happening. If we call ourselves a business coach, there's less chance, but it could still happen at the same time.
Could I just ask Adrian?
Sorry, Helen, go ahead. Go ahead, Helen.
Could I just ask Adrian, if we do come across people that want relationship coaching, can we refer them to you?
Well, you can, but some of your colleagues sitting beside you here today might also like to be referred to as well.
Who wants to do relationship coaching, so we know who the go-to people are? Because I just want to pass them on quick.
Helen, throw them all my way. Sure, I love good challenge.
There you go. Look, to be honest with you, I know we're laughing at that, but in actual fact, that is something that you guys should be thinking about. In other words, how to resource each other, because you all won't want to work in the same area. So keep in touch with each other and become coaching associates, where you can pass on clients to each other when they're not in your niche area, if you like, if you have a niche area. So absolutely, you should be doing that. So guys, okay, so that's
Can I just ask one? Can I just ask? I just want to get your thoughts on something, Adrian. Yeah. I read a book recently called "Couples That Work," and it was about dual career couples and how they can manage their, both careers and family, and less around like who drops and collects the kids. So not that, right? More around fulfilling each other's needs, how life changes. Do you see much of that, Adrian, or is it like a pie in the sky topic? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Do you see much of what? I
don't know, like couples that, that need coaching, and that's generally driven through careers, or do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, look, there are people that are generally driven through careers. Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
So if they decide to get coaching, you will definitely see it. So yes. So I mean, and I've coached people, couples. In fact, I've coached couples who run a business together, as well as being married to each other. So you can find you can come up in any situation, to be honest with you. So that would not be unusual, Dee, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah, good.
And in terms of, so actually that kind of brings me, unless someone wants to ask me a question about working with individuals, before I move over to working with couples and business partners. You have been trained to do this already, so you know how to do it. Just watch your own stuff coming into play. Okay? So, couples and business partners. All right. That's what we're going to focus on for the next half hour or so. So, guys, the main obvious difference between working with an individual client and two clients is that there's more than one agenda to be kind of focusing on. I think it was Dee or someone that said it earlier about, that there's three kind of agendas really that you're dealing with when you're working with a couple. And that's the two individual agendas. And believe me, they will have their individual agendas. And then there's the couple agenda or the partner's agenda. And your job as a coach, as a relationship coach, is to represent that couple's or partner's agenda. Does that make sense? So in other words, that's the ground you need to be standing in all through the sessions. And that's the common ground that both of them need to be coming into, and it's your job to bring them in there, because basically because that's their agenda. In other words, even though they have their individual agendas, their main agenda, which you know because they've both signed up for the coaching with you, it is to work on their relationship. And that's the agenda you have to make sure you're representing. Does that make sense? So there's a few things then I want to say to you about working with couples or partners. First thing is that, you know, when you get an initial call looking for you as a coach, to coach people, to coach them, the likelihood is you will get a call from one person. It's probably not going to happen that you'll get a conference call from the two. Okay, so and the likelihood is then that one of the two is driving the coaching piece. That makes sense? One of the two is driving. Now, it's not always the case, but it's nearly always the case. So therefore, the other person mightn't be on the exact same page as the person who has made the appointment. And you will get a fairly good sense during that initial call as to what's going on. In other words, why the two people want to come to you. And you will ask questions like about the other person. So is the other person as interested in coming along as you are? You get a sense of that. And generally speaking, they're not going to lie to you. They're going to tell you straight up. So they'll either say, oh no, we both recognize this has to happen, otherwise we're in trouble. Or they might say, well, you know, to be honest with you, they're not as motivated to do it, but we both know something has to change. So it'll be stuff like that. So when you do have the first session, guys, oh yeah, and by the way, I've tried lots of different things. I recommend 90-minute sessions when you're working with two people. An hourly session won't cut it, honestly. I've tried it. There's just too much happening. And I've found that 2-hour session, things tend to drag a bit, or we're covering the same ground. So 90 minutes I would recommend. However, that's my recommendation. If you guys are working with couples yourselves or business partners yourselves, you might find that something else works for you, and that's absolutely fine. Okay. In other words, it's not a rule to have it as 90 minutes. So when the two people do come, then it's important, as you would absolutely know, Elias, that you can't take sides, right? Regardless of what you're hearing. Now, I'm kind of laughing a little bit at that, but I can tell you this much: sometimes you could be really tested on that. Again, we're humans, and you know we'll have a relationship with the two people individually, as well as the fact that they're a couple, and you know the way that works. You know, if you go out socializing and you meet a couple, and you know they're a couple, you're still going to have a relationship with each of them individually. So because we connect differently with people. So our job is to make sure that our individual connections with the two in front of us are totally secondary to the connection with the two of them, because we have to represent the two of them equally. So we need to be watchful of that. So making sure that you're not taking sides, and be watchful of anything that's been triggered in you that might be allowing that to happen. I've been tested on that, guys, a couple of times. I know you'd be very surprised to hear that, but yes, I have been tested, and I remember working with a couple where the husband was a complete control guy, and this wasn't done, by the way. It was a complete control guy. It really was. He was one of these guys who knew everything about everything, and made sure that you knew that from the get-go. And one of the things that he was particularly knowledgeable on was communication skills, which was kind of interesting. That was made very clear at the very beginning, because that was absolutely one of the main problems. But anyway, and I know that some of the things that this guy was saying, I remember he said one thing at one point, and believe it or not, I actually wanted to box the head off him.
Sorry, should be on mute.
No, I didn't, guys. I didn't. But I could feel a reaction, a very strong reaction, and I needed to deal with that pretty quickly. Now it was fairly what's the word? The stuff he was saying was very strong and very, like, I mean, his wife used to sit quietly beside him and say very little unless I brought her into play, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a second. And he didn't say a huge amount either, but what he said kind of kept his wife fairly quiet. And at one point, I remember asking them the question, so why are you really here? Why do you really want to stay in this relationship? In other words, he was saying things that did not fit with him wanting to keep the relationship intact. And you know that we've talked to you before on the course, when you hear inconsistencies coming from your client, you need to challenge that. Okay, well, if you hear inconsistencies coming from two people, you absolutely need to challenge it. So I said, look, based on what you're saying, I'm kind of wondering why it is that you want to stay in this relationship. And his answer was, because I don't trust her to look after my son. This was on the back of a lot of very strong comments, putting her down, dismissing her, but when he said that, that's when I thought, okay, I'm going to hit you. No, I didn't do it, but and thankfully I managed to bypass that, get away from that. But this guy was so into his own head and lost in his head about, stuff like relationships and communication, and thinking he knew everything about everything, and totally dismissing his wife. And she was 100% the bad guy, sort of thing. Now, there was no indication at all of any physical abuse stuff. There was nothing like that happening. But you mightn't all know this, but from January the 1st in 2019, it became criminal. Coercive control became a criminality, if you like, in Ireland. And this guy was seriously doing this kind of stuff. It was really bad. But anyway, so why am I talking about that? Oh yeah, because I got really tested on that, guys. So, but I did manage to get some stuff out of him, because I asked him about. I said, look, you said you're excellent at communication skills. I said, surely you know that one of the things that's most important in a relationship, particularly an intimate relationship, is empathy. And I says, I've got to be honest with you, I'm not hearing any empathy here. So can you explain that to me? And he says, I can. I have empathy. I've given up on it because it just backfires on me. That was his answer to that. And I says, tell me about that. So he started to tell me things which were just having a go at her again, and her family. And so I said, okay, so you have empathy, but you're not using it. And he says, yes, because I just get drained by using it. And I says, okay, so would it be fair to say then that you have empathy, you don't use it, but it's in your locker? And he says, yes, it's in my locker. So I says, okay. And again, going back to your knowledge of communication skills, is there anything else that you feel is really important in terms of communication that you have given up on or that you're not using and it's also in your locker? So it was quite an interesting, I didn't set a trap for him, but it kind of felt as if it did, because he just came out with all the stuff. He says, well, obviously another thing that's really important in terms of communicating is trust. He says, but I can't use that either. So he started to come out with a whole load of things that are absolutely essential particularly in an intimate relationship, and he's not using them. So I listed all of them. I said, so you have all of these in your locker, and you're not using them, and yet you still want to stay in the relationship. What kind of a relationship is that? That is devoid of all the most important things to keep a relationship together. So and now I don't know what you're thinking about what I'm saying here, and whether you think, do we have a right to do that, or can we challenge people like that? I mean, obviously you're not going to be saying that to every couple. It's just in that particular scenario, there was such an inconsistency going on that I felt this person needs to be challenged. So anyway, I challenged him on it. He came out with all the stuff, and you know, I said, so okay, so you want to stay in a relationship that has none of the good stuff in it, and you're saying you want to do that because you don't trust your wife with your son. And then I would have gone back to her. So by the way, when I said earlier that she said very little, that is always a possibility with when you have two clients sitting in front of you. So one of them talks a lot and the other says very little. Okay, so given that you're there to represent both, you obviously need to engage the other person as much as possible. So you need to hear the two voices. And obviously I would have been doing that with that person's wife during those sessions. Just to finish off that piece, guys, what came out of that is they split up, and she came back to me for sessions herself afterwards. And so as you can imagine, there was a huge power dynamic going on in that relationship, and toxic. It was very toxic. Unfortunately, she had a very strong family behind her, and they helped in the background, and as well as that, he didn't take the son with him, if you know what I mean. He didn't just back off with the son. They sorted that problem out. I don't know what he did. I never heard from him again. I do hope he went to someone and got help, because he just living in his head, that guy. But anyway, so in terms then of working with the two people, always. Yeah, who's asking the question? Mary. Sorry, Mary. Yeah.
Can I just ask you, do you remember who it was that made the initial call for the coaching? Was it the husband or wife?
It was the wife.
It was the wife, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Which is actually kind of unusual in the sense that the person who normally makes that call is more likely to be the person that talks most.
Yeah.
But obviously, given what I just said about the scenario, obviously she knew that she couldn't take any more of that. But she was taking it, and that's the thing you need to remember as well, that if you see him as a bully, you see her as a victim. But the victim is just as much of the problem as the bully. And when you're working with the two of them, you're trying to help to change the dynamic between them. And you ask questions about it. So I would have been challenging her quite a bit as well on why is it that she can sit there and allow him to say what he's saying about her in such a derogatory fashion, and not say anything. So obviously I'm going to be asking those questions as well. So our job isn't to fix their relationship. Our job is to represent their couple agenda or their partner agenda, and let it play itself out in whatever way it needs to play itself out.
So then this
See you, Susie. Okay, so guys, then, so let me take you through what the kind of things you need to be watchful when you're working with the two. First of all, making sure you're representing the two equally. Also, and that doesn't mean, by the way, giving them equal time to talk. So that's, you're not going to be timing them, and saying, well, you've got 7 minutes more to go now. You're not timing them. And by the way, guys, I would have no ground rules. So people often ask me, surely you set up ground rules at the beginning. The only ground rule, if you want to call it that I would bring into play is that they allow each other to speak. But I wouldn't be saying to them at the start, now this is the way it works. You only answer questions when I ask a question. I don't want anyone interfering with what the other person is saying. One person, one voice only at a time. This kind of stuff. Don't do that. Because that makes it just ridiculous. It's not real stuff. What you need to be able to do is to create a scenario that makes it easy for you to see very quickly the kind of dynamics that's going on. In other words, what's happening at home. You need to be able to see that. So you need to allow them to raise their voices at each other. You need to manage it as well, obviously. You can't just shut them up straight away as soon as one gets angry with the other. You need to see what's going on, and you need to ask them about it. So when you see one of them being very dismissive towards the other one, you ask about that. You say, can you tell me what that's about? If you see one person, and by the way, guys, you're going to be really be clued into the body language stuff, because when one person is talking, make sure you're watching the other person as well, because you're going to see things that are going to give you clues to what's going on between them. So you'll see eyes rolling up to the heavens. You'll see hands going up in the air like this. You'll see people just sitting back in the seat as if, what's the point? You're going to see stuff, and you need to ask about it. You can't make an assumption you know what it means. So you say, I noticed when that person was saying that, that you just sat back in the chair and just seemed to withdraw. Can you tell me what was going on there? Always ask that. They're not going to say, oh, that wasn't me, I didn't do that. They're going to tell you exactly what was going on. And the other person is not going to be one bit surprised either, by the way, because they've seen this 1,000 times at home. Does that make sense? So, yeah. Yes, Steve.
I actually have two questions. One, and maybe it's obvious, but I'd just like to hear you say it, like, in listening to you talk, what is the difference between relationship counseling and relationship coaching? Okay.
What is the difference between counseling and coaching?
Oh yeah, so it's action orientated. It's taking you from the present to the future. So yeah, okay. That's
I just want to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah, okay.
Never even go there in your head. If you're going there in your head, you're moving away from coaching. So your job, as it always is as a coach, is to get an understanding of what's currently going on for your client or clients, what are the issues, and then getting a sense of how they got there, and then helping them to see what it is that they want changed, and what are the obstacles that they see that's in the way, and then how they can work on those obstacles to remove them.
But this might sound like a a ridiculous question.
Yeah.
Is that not what a relationship counselor would also do? Like, what would be the difference? What, you know what I mean?
Okay, so I was a relationship counselor.
Yeah, okay, that's, yeah, great.
So before I was coaching couples, I was counseling couples, for example. And I would never go back to counseling couples again after I came across coaching and saw it. Now, this is my own personal experience, I guess. So I'm not necessarily talking for the whole counseling industry when I'm talking here. But what I will say is, and what I did notice what was happening with the counseling side of things is the past was taken over. The past stuff was coming in too much. Now, past is important. It's not like it's not important, but there was too many references to the past and to history between them, and history between the in-laws and stuff like that. And it was taken away from what they needed to be focusing on themselves, and being in the present and dealing with what's going on now. So coaching helps people to get focused on what they're actually currently dealing with. Knowing where it's coming from is important only up to a point. And after that, it just gets in the way. It becomes a shadow getting in the light of the present. That's all it becomes. So really what we need to do as coaches is get that sense of what's going on right now, what they'd like to see happening in the future between them, and then what are the things that they need to start working on to get them to that point.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's clear, yeah.
So always think of it about, it's very progressive, proactive, and focus them on their desired outcomes. All right. So other things then to watch or to focus on with a couple or business partners, because guys, I'm talking couples here, but I'm actually talking business partners, because of course you're going to have very similar kind of situations going on. Now, you know, with the intimate relationships, they may be referring to upstairs or the bedroom stuff, or they'll have lots of different phrases that they'll use rather than saying our sexual relationship. They'll use all sorts of different things. And presumably you won't be hearing that from the business partners. So you'll be hearing other things, although it's possible as well, I guess. But so you'll be hearing other things. But at the end of the day, you're talking about the dynamics between the two. You're obviously and always talking about values conflicts. So it doesn't matter whether they're business partners or an intimate couple. It doesn't matter whether they're same sex or different sex. Everyone is different in terms of their own values and beliefs about life. And everyone has a history that is there long before they probably met this other person. And so a history with the world. So basically conflict around values very often rears its head. It's an extremely common thing, whether it's an intimate relationship or business relationship. So in terms of the business side of things, one of the more obvious scenarios could be where one of the business partners is one of these guys who's an ideas guy or girl, and all they want to do is to get moving forward, build a business, do new things, expand and stuff like that. The other person may be the person who is believes in creating a big foundation, making sure that they are able to keep what they already have, hold on to it, work on the stuff they are already doing, rather than thinking about expanding. And that can create big conflicts with business partners, as you could probably imagine. And as a result of that, people start to disrespect each other. The trust between them can erode fairly quickly because they're not listening to each other. And that's the problem. They're not listening to the other person. And one of your jobs as a relationship coach is to get the people listening to each other. That is probably the most central piece, because that has not been happening, whether they're business partners or intimate partners. It doesn't matter. That is all. Or it could be siblings that you're dealing with. It could be a mother and son. I remember actually having a mother and son coming to me where the son was on the verge of suing the mother for not paying the fees for some university thing. I can't remember the exact details.
Oh my God, my mother would literally slap the sense into me.
Okay. Well, there you go. Well, everyone is different, and it was quite an incredible scenario. But yeah, he was on the verge of doing that, and like the parents were split up. The father was over in Germany, and he had spent the last few years with the mother in Ireland, and then he went over to Germany when he I don't know, when he did the Leaving Cert or something like that, and then he started looking for her to continue to fund him to do his courses in Germany rather than getting his father to do it, because his father told him to feck off basically, and his father told him to get a job. So anyway, look, there's lots of mad stuff that you'll actually come across. But thankfully, there was actually a good ending to that scenario where, because you're not focusing on what they're focusing on. They're focusing on the bad stuff between them. You're focusing on the relationship between them. And you're helping them to move past that. And you'll be asking them questions such as, you know, when was the relationship between you at its best? When did you, and you could do a scale of 1 to 10. Well, what is it currently at right now? So your satisfaction level with the relationship right now on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being absolutely fantastic and clearly 1 the exact opposite. Get them to do that. And then also ask, when was it ever at a 10? So in terms of intimate couples, I'm pretty sure it was, you know, at a 10 or, you know, fairly close to a 10. But ask them, and ask them, when it was at a 10, what was the relationship like? What were they doing together that they're not currently doing? That generally speaking, brings the spark back to them, if the spark seems to have burnt out. Well, hopefully not completely burnt out, but the embers are still there, sort of. So you can bring them back together by focusing on what brought them together in the first place, why they loved each other in the first place. Now, shit happens in life, we know this, and things change. But again, you will always check in, by the way, with them on, so are the two of you still on track to stay together? Is that still the plan? You will be asking questions like that. You can't be making assumptions, you know, and obviously their answers are very important. So I would say as well, guys, that as I said, 90 minutes, you're not going to get everything done in one session, and never pack the first session. Don't try and pack it, you know, let things flow, and make sure they're going away with something to change. Okay. Yeah, Teresa, yeah?
Sorry, I just wanted to ask you, you said you were a counsellor first. Did that kind of inform you? Did that give you a sort of a more solid backing? Because I just feel I would have some knowledge, but again, just like this course has been great, but I don't know if it would give me enough solid backing. Did the counselling sort of help you?
Did it help me? I guess I helped me. In other words, by the person I was up to that point, apart from the counselling, and that's what brought me into counselling, I guess. So, and I would have had 10 years of being a counsellor before coaching piece, for example.
Right, okay.
Yes, that would help. But then again, everything that you guys have done in the past will also help. You know, as long as it's integrated well and you can use it. So we're all going to be different in terms of the kind of coach that we're going to be. And our other skills are going to help. They could get in the way, so obviously we have to watch that naturally. So I certainly, Teresa, I wouldn't say that if it wasn't for the counselling, that I wouldn't be able to do the coaching. I certainly wouldn't say that.
Okay.
My interest in people is what allows me to do it. And my interest in other things in life as well. I would say they're far more important, to be totally honest.
All right, thank you.
And my interest in relationships, by the way, I mean, you might ask, or you might be wondering, and therefore not ask, well, why relationship coaching? For me, if I wasn't a trainer, and if I wasn't running the company, and if I was solely a coach, I would likely be either a relationship coach or a spiritual coach, because they're the two things that I'd be most interested in, or that ignite me more than anything else. And I'd be a sports coach as well in third place, but that, you know, so for me, it's all about relationships. Why I've had my share of shit stuff going on in terms of relationships in the past. It has really brought me down to my knees at times, and I've gone through a lot of some 2 or 3 years where I really found it very difficult to keep going. But I did. But I remember as a 15-year-old wanting to be in love. I mean, that's fucking bit mental. But anyway, we all have our journeys. So each one of us has their own journeys, and our pathways are already there. I don't think we come in with a clean slate, and who knows where they come from, and that's another day's work totally. But so Teresa, no, I really don't think it was the counselling at all. I think it was brought me into counselling, also brought me into coaching.
Okay, thank you.
So
Adrian,
yeah.
Sorry, one other question. Is there ever a time if you're doing relationship coaching that you coach only one of the clients?
Good question. Yeah, because I did want to bring that into play. So this will happen where you're coaching a client about something maybe totally different to relationship stuff, and then suddenly they say, look, would it be possible for my wife or my husband to come for some sessions?
Yeah, right.
Because you know, things aren't great at home, and I know I've been here about other things, but to be honest with you, this is really bad in the background, or whatever. So that could happen, and you could have had 4 or 5 or 6 sessions with this person already on the other stuff. So, and if you want to work with relationships, if you like, so yes, you can take that, you can bring the other person into play. However, you would not do it without seeing the other person for a couple of sessions first on their own. In other words, you need to have a relationship with that person as well. Otherwise, the dynamics would not be right at all. It would be, you know, because every time you'd be listening to the person you've been coaching already, the other person might be thinking you're siding with them. You don't know. So I would definitely say, yes, that can happen, but make sure you do a couple of sessions to connect with that person individually, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question then that might bring into play is if it's a thing that you are working with a couple, would you stop working with the couple and work with them individually, separately, and then come back working as a couple? And I don't know if any were thinking about that kind of scenario. I personally don't think that should be the plan. So I wouldn't rule it out as an end product. In other words, it is happening by itself, but I wouldn't say that should be part of the coaching plan. So in other words, if a couple come and then in whatever way it might happen, one of them decides to pull out and the other is now coming back to you, then that's fine to work with that person. It is unlikely that you'll be working with the two of them again. I won't say that can never happen, because how can I say that? But I think, you know, there's a reason why. I mean, I remember working with a couple, and I think that we'd done about 3 sessions or something, and the two of them were working, and I think it was a 5:30 session or something in the evening. So the two of them had come from their separate jobs in their cars to the session, and I was sitting with the wife for a few minutes, and then I noticed the time, and I says, "Where's, let's say, John?" I said, "So where's John? Is he coming?" And she said. She said very knowingly, "Oh yeah, he's sitting outside in the car." So I says, oh, okay. And I says, why is John sitting outside in the car when the coaching session started 5 minutes ago? Is he taking a call or something? She says, oh, no. He told me to come up myself because I'm the one that has the problems. And she just,
My goodness,
just kind of said it as if I don't know, it's as if it was complete matter of fact stuff, and she didn't seem to have any issue with it whatsoever. So I says to her, I said, well, just as a matter of interest, why is he sitting outside in the car then? Why didn't he just go home? And she said, well, he just came anyway. So I said, well, do me a favor and go down and tell him to come up. So he came
it's
up.
unbelievable.
This is getting more interesting by the minute. I think I'm going to consider this myself.
Too funny.
I could tell the stories. I don't have time. But anyway, he came up and we sat down. I says, hiya, John. I says, can you tell me why were you sitting in the car? I'm not sitting up here. He says, well, we had a chat. And we both agreed that she needed to come for the session because it's really the stuff with her that's causing the problems.
Oh my God. That's when avoiding the punching comes into play, I'm sure.
Go back to the car, John.
Yeah, back to the car till you come back with a better mindset.
Anyway, it was very interesting what came out of that, to be honest with you. And this is why all the time you need to be there for the two.
Adrian, please finish the story, please.
Anthony, I'm coming to it, right? So anyway, basically, I just said, okay, so tell me then what you, John, think the problem. Let's say her name is Mary. What the problem with Mary is? He says, well, and he mentioned a few things. Now I actually can't remember the details of it, and I honestly can't. So I says, okay, so does that mean then that there isn't a problem with the relationship? So the relationship isn't the problem. It's just Mary has problems. So no. Like Mary's problems are causing problems in the relationship. So I said to John, so John, what kind of problems are being caused in the relationship then? So I got him to start telling me the things that was wrong in the relationship. And then I asked him, I says, give me one of those things and tell me how you deal with that in the relationship. So he started to talk about that. And I says, okay. I says, and do you find that difficult to deal in the relationship? And he says, yeah, it's very difficult. I says, okay. So I says, would you like to be able to deal with that better in the relationship? He said, well, yeah, I mean, and I says, so can we do that here? I mean, we're kind of doing that now anyway. Will we just continue for this session and see how that goes? So he said, well, yeah, I mean, so anyway, look, they got back on track anyway, guys. But I guess for us as coaches, we just need to be present, see what's going on, ask questions about it, represent the two of them, and that's it. That our job. Okay, I'm going to say simple, but I understand if you're working with two people and you've never worked with two people before, it's not as simple as that. But coaching is simple, and just ask the straightforward questions and work with the information that's available and bring more relevant information out. So guys, the other thing I want to say, and I realize the time, and I do have to stop, and I'm really sorry about this, but so I want to say one more thing in terms then. So commitment levels, not a bad idea to do a scale of 1 to 10 on the commitment levels as well, and make sure you're watching intently when one person is saying I'm at a 8, and watch the other person's face, because if they say 8, the likelihood is the other person's face will just kind of give the game away, really.
Adrian, is that committed to the coaching or the relationship?
No, the relationship.
Okay.
Relationship, yeah. So it's always good. So you need to get a sense of where they're at with each other on the different things. The other thing, guys, I want to say to you is if you're working with an intimate couple, the intimacy stuff is likely to come up. So if you have any issues with that yourself, there is a danger that's going to get in the way of you asking the questions that you absolutely need to be asking. So you're human, it is possible. Tell yourself, okay, this has nothing to do with me, nothing to do with my stuff. I need to be there for these two people. And just ask the questions that need to be asked. Don't be afraid. But we all have our own stuff as well. So, but the more delicate the conversation, the more possible that our stuff could get brought into play. And we just need to check in with someone else afterwards about it, another coach or a mentor coach or a supervisor. So guys, length of time in between sessions. No more, sorry, I beg your pardon, no less than 2 weeks. Okay, there has to be a minimum of 2 weeks, unless there's some very, very specific reason not to do that. Okay, because they need to work on the stuff themselves. So I would also say then that at some point, maybe after 2 or 3 sessions, maybe you suggest that they extend that out to maybe 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So what you're trying to do is to get them to be empowered within the relationship, not to be relying on you to sort stuff out for them. But you still need to be going at their pace. So in other words, if they're saying to you, oh, I don't know, I remember a young couple that had a lot of shit between them, but they really worked very hard. And I was so impressed with the way they were going away and doing all the stuff that they came up with to do. And the relationship was changing really, really well. And you could see it the way they were connecting with each other in the room. It was brilliant. And when I kind of thought that we're pretty much at an end, so we probably had I don't know, 5 or 6 sessions, I can't remember. I suggested that maybe we set the next session for, oh no, sorry, I suggested that, you know, I asked, so do you think we're finished? It really did look as if they had done all the stuff, and the 2 of them went, no, we're not finished, no way. And I said, oh, okay, so and they both said, look, I know we'll fall back into our old ways. No way, we're not ready for that yet. So I mean, like, you're not going to know that. So you can make suggestions, but make sure you're still staying on your client's agenda. Okay. I would suggest, however, that at some point, maybe with the couple now I'm talking about, maybe move to 3 months. A point. So let's try 3 months. And see how we get on in that 3 months. And then that should be a really good guide to you guys to see if you've been able to bed in the new stuff you're doing together. Okay, again, if they shriek and jump up and say no, that's fine as well. Okay, but that's the way I'd look at it. Remember, you're helping them to take more power in the relationship with each other. And you're kind of, I suppose, gently and subtly moving back away from them. That make sense? So guys, okay, is there any questions? I know it's nearly 1:15 and I'm really sorry.
I have one practical question.
Sure.
I presume for relationships, partnerships, whatever, you would charge more?
Okay.
Or do you? I don't know.
So the question is, do you?
Yeah, I suppose do you, yeah.
Well, okay, here's the straightforward answer. You can if you like. Okay. I'm not being smart. Yeah. But I'll tell you what I do. Generally speaking. Do I charge double? No, I don't. I could. And again, it's down to each coach what value you're putting on this and what costings you're putting on it. And it's definitely your choice. The way I do it is I would do it cost and a half, if you like. So in other words, I'd add on a half extra. Yeah. So for example, if you normally charge 100 euros, then you're charging 150 euros for the couple. But I've been totally honest with you, Nita, that's down to each one of you guys as to what to do in relation to that. If it was business partners, it may be a little bit dearer. Business stuff often is.
Makes sense.
Okay. So, any other questions before we let you go on your lunch? And I'm sorry, again, like Owen this morning as well, there's so much you could have talked about career. There's so much I could talk about this, and there's so many stories I could tell you about scenarios. But I can't do it now, unfortunately. But guys, if you're interested in relationships and you love coaching, just join the dots. just be relationship coach. if it's your thing, don't be afraid of it. You'd be well able to do it. Okay, we'll have the relationship coaching workshop on again next year. I'm not yet sure when that will be, and if you're still interested at that point, give me a shout. If you're interested before that and you need some help or guidance, give me a shout also. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, I'm going to finish up. 2:30, guys. Mirren will be here, and Mirren is excellent. She is excellent, and so she's going to take you through building a practice, really, or marketing. Yes, who's that?
Oh,
that's so cute.
Yeah, she's.
I was going to ask a question.
Is that your man at the door again, Adrian? That fell at the door again.
No, at the door. I didn't actually tell you, but worse than that, I may have told you when I was coaching a person. I was 10 minutes into the session and I noticed my son peeping out from behind the curtains.
Oh.
No way.
Yeah. No, he was 16. No, he wasn't 16. No, he was about 2 or 3 or something like that. And suddenly I saw the curtains moving, and next thing I saw his head popping out. A great session, and the client started talking about their inner child and all. So you can weave anything into a session, guys. Seriously. But anyway, I'll let you go. Enjoy your lunch. You can come back a little bit before 2:30 to have a chat if you want to. You should be able to get back in, hopefully. But I'll see you at 2:30 and enjoy lunch.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks a million. Okay.